You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. For more great shows like the one you're about to enjoy, visit electronicmediacollective.com. And now, our feature presentation.
Welcome to the exciting world of the movies.
Hello, retro movie lovers. It's a new year and it's time to go punk in a big way. I'm really excited talking about one of my all-time favorite films, a movie that means so much to me. I can't even describe it right now. But, I'm happy to be joined by a brand new friend here. You guys all know him. He's the guy that runs the awesome website, GamerGuy's Review. Everybody, roll it in. I should have asked you before this. Do you like William or Will better?
Either or is fine. I prefer William, but Will's okay.
Okay, I'll call you William. So everybody, welcome William to the show. Hey, what's going on, man?
You know, when someone says something like that, my first reaction is I want to end the conversation.
Oh.
You know something? You're all right.
Exactly. So many quotes from this movie that will just stick in your head. Even if you don't even remember where they came from, there's certain lines in this movie that will stick forever. So yeah, we're rolling with the cult punk classic. Like, I want to say this movie was so popular for about 20 years, and I want to say like the last 5 years or so, like the talk about it has gone a little bit quiet. Like, I don't know why, but I'm hoping this is a nice blast from the past from people. We're talking about the one and only Repo Man. Me and William here, we're rolling off the same page here. We're rolling off the Criterion Collection Blu-ray, which I think is the latest release, but as you guys know, this movie's been released in various DVDs from anywhere from Anchor Bay to Universal to UK Blu-rays and everything. Like, I have this movie on so many formats, it's not even funny, but we're rolling off the Criterion Collection one, and we got it paused right at like the 13-second mark. For some reason, Criterion put their logo ahead of this, so we're going to skip past that, and we're going on the black that's right before the old school Universal MCA company logo. So we got a black screen. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go. And when you hear me say the word go, everybody, if you're following along with the disc or a stream or whatever the hell you got, or maybe a tape, who knows, hit play. You got your remote in hand ready to go, William?
I do.
All right, everybody. 1, 2, 3, go. All right, beautiful, beautiful Starfield, which, like, I know, like, people don't really talk about opening titles this much, but I gotta say, like, this opening title, this old school Universal, like, it's actually, like, a really good special effect when you look at it compared to, like, shit that was in space movies of the time.
It is. It's a classic logo.
But what is not classic is these stripped down punk rock opening titles, wouldn't you say?
No, I think the opening credits to Repo Man are iconic. They fit in with the whole motif of this movie.
That's what I'm saying. Like, don't you think they kind of go along with the canned food look a little bit?
You know, in a way, when you think about it like that, yeah, it kind of does.
Yeah.
Which, you know, there's a funny story behind the whole generic products that are prevalent throughout the movie.
I want to say, too, like, this time, I've been watching that UK Blu-ray for years until this version came out, and I really kind of just repurchased this Criterion version to get all the extras, you know? But for some reason, the first time me watching this copy, it made me realize that it looks like the opening titles, or at least that, like, map thing, it has a very video-ish look to it.
It does. I actually got the Criterion edition myself recently during Barnes & Noble's Black Friday sale. And it's funny, for the longest while, I had this movie on VHS, and, you know, while this is a great transfer and all, I feel like there's something missing with the fact that it's at a higher, cleaner resolution, because on VHS, I think that the grainy look of it actually fits the movie.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm very much the guy who's all about trying to get the highest quality of any movie, just in terms of trying to approximate what the original film print looked like. But, like, in a weird way, like, and I know Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another one where people feel like the shittier looks the better, but I gotta say, like, this one too, and I have a very vivid memory of going to purchase the VHS of this at a store called Media Play, which is long out of existence. But I remember watching that VHS copy for, I don't know, roughly 3 or 4 years until the Anchor Bay DVD came out, and I bought that. But yeah, that VHS copy, man, it's solid in a way that's like I don't know how to describe it. Like it almost is, and if you really want like a taste almost of what that feels like, they do have the weird alternate TV version on this Criterion disc, and it has somewhat of a VHS look to it as well. But I know what you mean. Like this movie, like I think it plays very well both in a clean like format, and also in a very grungy format like VHS, or better yet, I'd say broadcast cable back in the day.
And side note, say what you will about the movie, but I did appreciate the fact that the 2018 Halloween movie used Repo Man at a certain point. It's what the kid's watching when the babysitter's watching the little kid.
Yeah, you're right about that. I totally forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's this scene that's playing on the TV when she walks in on the kid to put him to bed. And I was like, hey, Repo Man, all right.
Yeah, and like this scene in particular, like it's kind of funny, but like all these kind of like almost Western feeling scenes that are in the movie, like this, and then like when later on when Otto's by the train tracks and stuff, like even though like the movie takes place in Los Angeles, like I don't know why, like even when it's like in the middle of the city, like you always feel like it's almost like a weird Western feeling lawlessness, like it's like takes place in an older time than it even really does.
Well, that's funny. That's the same way I feel about Repo Man. Is that while a lot of people say it's a punk movie, I also get a lot of Western vibes from the movie, especially with like you said, even though it's set in L.A., it's set in the boonies of L.A., and there's a sort of outlawish feel to that part of town that we see throughout the movie.
Definitely, like, especially whenever you see Otto, like, coming back home, how much of a trek it is for him to get back home to where his parents live. And then also, too, I think it's intentional, but a lot of the places where they repossess the cars are definitely, like, in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
We got to talk about this. I say, like, this scene in particular, like, you'll really get the feel and the essence of what this movie's going for with this scene right here.
Mm-hmm. And there's Napoleon Dynamite on the left singing about 7-Up.
Exactly. Good old John Heder, his early days.
Actually, no. What is funny, and I'll bring this up as a piece of trivia, but the guy who plays the nerd here, Kevin, he actually went on to become like a band member in one of the bands that provide music for Repo Man, the Circle Jerks.
Yeah, like there's like a really weird like incestuous, so like becoming obsessed with this movie. Like I kind of got into this movie when I first got into punk rock in my late teens, early 20s, and like like I feverishly devoured any kind of bit of trivia or anything to do with this movie. First with the soundtrack, and then with the movie. I actually almost kind of discovered the soundtrack first, so that it was kind of weird when I finally did watch the movie. And I had seen the movie like as a kid, bits and pieces on cable, but I remember like the flying car and shit, but like I didn't really remember like the whole kind of, ethics and feel of it. And so like, yeah, by the time I actually sat down to watch the movie, it's, like, cause as the music and the soundtrack was a big deal. Like I think when the movie came out, I think the soundtrack actually made more money than the movie did supposedly. But it's like, yeah, like the music is so just tied to this movie, because even though everybody says, oh, it's a punk movie, like the soundtrack is very like eclectic and strange.
It is, because you have not only punk acts like Iggy Pop, Black Flag, and Circle Jerks. You also have like more esoteric groups. Like I think there's a group called Juicy Bananas or something like that. I know there's a group called the Plugs.
Yeah. And also too, like I can't remember exactly if it's the Plugs or which one of the bands, but the main, whatever band does like the main score, Tito Lariva. So like a lot of people know from from Dusk Till Dawn and stuff. Like I was surprised he was working on film score shit like this early, like way before then. And I actually got to see his band Tito and Tarantula in the late 90s. It was like really cool. I think he's actually a pretty underrated musician. But yeah, that opening scene with the generic ass supermarket, and then this scene, with Otto kind of does his little rebellion and kind of tells the square boss to, basically go fuck off, as any real punk would. And then this scene with Otto's girlfriend Debbie, who like they never address it, but she has a British accent. But Debbie, and kind of how their relationship falls apart because she's not faithful to him, and just, he splits out of here. He kind of doesn't belong anywhere, and that's why I think it's cool about it is, as much as it's a punk movie and Otto is a punk, he doesn't really fit into the straight world like a punk shouldn't, but he also doesn't really fit into the punk world because he's also in some ways more of like, I don't know, I always got him as like almost like he's a young guy, but he's almost like an old-fashioned character. Like, he doesn't really belong in either of the worlds.
Yeah, that's the same feeling I get from Otto as well. Is that he's neither nor, yet as the film progresses, he does go through like sort of a character arc. Because like here at the beginning, he's sitting by the railroad tracks, singing the song, but then not long after that, he meets Bud, joins the repo agency, and basically kind of grows up in the process. That is until the stuff with the Malibu happens, and then some tensions arise between not just his eventual girlfriend Layla, but also his sort of mentor Bud.
Yeah, and that scene with the train tracks, so I was talking about this movie plays good on any format. I always remember that scene having a beautiful look on the VHS and the DVD, and then like even more the colors now on the Blu-ray. Like, I don't know, like I have to say that was probably the scene. And then also too, like I just always liked the song TV Party, which he starts singing, but like that little scene of him and the loneliness and out by the train tracks and the bushes, it definitely, like we were talking about earlier, has like that kind of like, I don't know, guy lost in the West kind of feel. Like, I don't know, like it's just like, I think that scene more than anything is what hooked me into this movie the first couple times I watched it, and like what hooked me into the Otto character. And like it's kind of funny because like there's a lot of scenes where Otto's almost just like an observer. He's almost like the audience's eyes into this world of Repo Man. So he doesn't really almost have a character in a lot of scenes. But the scenes that are focused on his character, like the train track scene, if for some reason like those scenes didn't make it into the movie or something like that, like, or were cut out, like I think the movie would suffer greatly, because it's like you really only learn who Otto is in these little kind of snippets here and there like that.
Yeah. I think for me, what the turning point is for Otto's character is when he returns home to his parents, and he's all like, "Hey, Dad, you know how you promised me $1,000 if I finish high school? Well, I want to finish high school, but first I'd like the money." He's like, "No, son, we send all that money off to Bibles that are going to be sent to the people in Central America." And he's like, "All right, that's it."
Exactly. And like I think it's one of those things, because I haven't viewed every Alex Cox film, but I've seen quite a few. I'd say I've seen probably more than half of his filmography, and he's a very unique storyteller. But I think this is one of his better movies in terms of like the way the story comes out, because there's a lot of subtle scenes like that where it's like almost blink if you miss it, or if you're not like a real observant viewer, like I think you miss a lot of the emotional beats. Because like what you said, like when Otto goes home to his family and you see that his family is these kind of like zoned out kind of hippie parents, like obsessed with like, cable TV ministries and whatever, like like you kind of see how it was kind of abandoned probably at an early age, and that's probably like what led him into the punk lifestyle there.
Yeah. Well, actually, it's funny. It's like even though Repo Man is one of my favorite movies and Alex Cox is one of my favorite film directors, this is the only film of his that I've seen, and I do want to see the other films he's done, like Sid and Nancy and Walker and stuff like that. But just for some reason, I haven't gotten around to it. Yeah,
like I had actually seen Sid and Nancy quite a bit on cable when I was a kid, so I was pretty familiar with it. That and Repo Man, I had caught bits of cable, so I was pretty familiar with these movies, but I didn't really get into them and like kind of rediscovered them until my early 20s. And I went back to Sid and Nancy because I was a big fan of the Sex Pistols, and I read multiple Sex Pistol biographies, and like I feel like Sid and Nancy gets a bum rap because it's not historically accurate in a lot of ways. But I feel like if you go into it knowing that, first of all, and you just look at it as a movie, like literally a motion picture, and you don't worry about, okay, what was the real life relationship and repercussions between Sid Vicious and Nancy Spungen or whatever. If you just look at it as like almost like a weird punk rock fairy tale movie, it's actually like a very well done motion picture.
Yeah.
And I would, even though it kind of is like a rock biography, I would look at it more of a punk rock love story than a true life story.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I was doing some research on Alex Cox before we started doing his commentary, and apparently he says he's blacklisted by Hollywood due to his experiences working on Walker.
Yeah, and Walker was a historical film with Ed Harris, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And it basically was one of those things where I've never seen the film myself, but from what I understand, it might have been one of the stories or one of the screenplays maybe that was like kind of almost unfilmable. So when they did do it, it just seemed like the production descended into chaos, and it seemed like they went over budget or whatever happened. And it's like, and it's like, but it's kind of crazy that was so long ago. Like, I want to say Walker was the late 80s, early 90s, something like that.
It was late 80s.
Yeah, it's just crazy, because especially in this day and age where I'd say like the last 10 years in particular, with the internet kind of turning, somewhat cult films into really popular cult films. Mm-hmm. And like, with the long life that Repo Man, like, I'm kind of surprised, like, somebody at some point, I mean, hell, if Richard Stanley can get back into the game of directing pretty, decently budgeted films, I don't know why Alex Cox couldn't, other than I could see possibly Alex Cox not being interested in a project that would be commercial enough for somebody to back, you know what I mean?
Well, I read a couple of interviews with Alex, and he said that he's perfectly fine with what he does nowadays, because he still does movies, but a lot of them they're low budget, they're crowd funded. So it means he doesn't have a lot of money to work with, but he has a lot of creative control over what gets to happen. Because I think the one of the more recent films he did was a film called Tombstone Rashomon, if I recall correctly. Yeah,
like I haven't seen that one. I've seen part of Repo Chick, and like, I gotta say, like, for a guy who really has a real command of filmmaking skills, like, I don't know, like, it probably is just time and budget, but his low budget stuff that I've seen, to me, it just doesn't even come anywhere near something like a Repo Man or Sid and Nancy, or even like a Straight to Hell type thing. Like with Repo Man in particular, like, I have to say, like, I mean, there's a few kind of bits and bobs of this movie where the storytelling kind of gets loosey-goosey and scenes kind of feel like a little, extraneous or whatever. But for the most part, for this basically being a movie where it was literally just actors, cars, and a camera, like, I think the guy crafts like a pretty cinematic world. And like, that's why I was really surprised, well, not surprised, but just disappointed to see something like Repo Chick, and and just kind of hard for me to get into, because I was just like, a lot of times, like, I feel like I can usually see something through a low budget or through, poor equipment or whatever. But like, just like, I don't know. It's just like, or maybe it's just me being more of a film fan, back in the days when stuff was cut together with film. But like, like, his older shit, I think, is the best.
Well, it's funny what you mentioned earlier about Repo Man, how it's just like a bunch of scenes with actors and cars and whatnot. Because I see Repo Man as a film about nothing, but also about something. Because for a good portion of the movie, it's just Repo Man doing Repo Man stuff. It isn't until like the last 30 minutes or so of the movie that the plot takes center stage, and the stuff with the Malibu becomes more prominent.
Yeah, like, we haven't really been going scene by scene, but I mean, it's hard to with this type of movie, just because there's so much surrounding it. There's so much that you want to talk about. But yeah, like, basically what we've been seeing here is like basically his introduction. First, he kind of becomes a Repo Man, like really through a trick. Harry Dean kind of throws him a line about, hey, you got to help me. My wife is sick. We got to get our car out of this bad neighborhood before it gets broken into or whatever. Mm-hmm. So he kind of repos the car, like, not knowing it. And then when he, like, is initially introduced to all the other Repo Men at the office, he, like a punk rocker, he just rejects it. I love the scene where they offer him a beer, and he just, once he finds out they're all Repo Men, he just pours the beer on to the floor in a defiant act. Like, But yeah, like I don't know if you ever, I'm sure you picked up on it, but like how the bus has the header of Edge City on it. So it's like I never knew, even though this is clearly Los Angeles, I never knew if Alex Cox was trying to like put this in a fictional setting or not.
No, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be Los Angeles, but it's like it's a film version of Los Angeles where there's a car being repossessed every 5 minutes, and there's more and more people going broke. Because that's another thing I noticed is like later on, especially in shots where like Otto's walking down the street, the how I describe it, poverty becomes more of a character in and of itself because the city becomes more run down. There's more bums and winos walking about the street, and generic products are taking over more of the stores. Because like the shootout later on in the convenience store.
Yeah.
Have you ever noticed like on the back wall with all the alcoholic drinks lined up, they're all just generically named, whereas earlier when they go to get some drinks, they're all name brand. So right. I kind of see that as like consumerism taking over the city, and the characters are oblivious to it.
Yeah, for sure. Like what I always got into, because I mean, obviously they couldn't, financially or whatever, outfit the entire stores and stuff with completely like either the generic and if you look, there's some labels of the fake brands where it looks like some of the fake brands are actually fake, which I guess we should preface. I do remember that white and blue packaging on products back in the day, but it wasn't nearly as prevalent as like what you see in this one. Like you would never like walk down like a whole aisle away in a store and see it, you know what I mean? But like when you did see it, and I think I usually saw it more on stuff like the popcorn and stuff, like more like snack foods. But when you did see it, even as a kid, it stuck out as like something is wrong here, something is strange. It was like really weird because packaging in general, for name brands, even kind of generic name brands, they always try to like pick a theme, a logo, every brand tries to usually pick a color, or at least a color scheme that identifies itself. And when everything is white or blue with the same font, it casts a very strange feel even when you just look at it. Like I will say one thing I'm disappointed in is I would have loved to try the generic beer, because that was a real one. That was one of the real ones. I think later when they get a drink and it just says drink, I think you can see it's just a sticker on it that just says drink. But yeah, like those brands were like so insane. And then like sometimes in the liquor store too, you can see like the real name brands, they kind of just turn backwards so you can't see them.
Yeah. Although it is funny because they say like they got a lot of those generic name products from a grocery store, but yet the people that they did receive sponsored from were the people that sell the little Christmas trees that you can hang in a car. And if you look closely in a lot of scenes when people are driving cars, you can see a little Christmas tree dangling on the rear view mirror.
Exactly. I think there's even a line of dialogue where like they take one out and look at it or something. They say you find one in every car. So it's it's like going back to what you were saying with the poverty and the winos everywhere. And then we see dead winos being collected, and we see dead winos. Some of them, like the one character later, when he's dead on a bench, they just light him up with a flamethrower. I think there's what I loved about this movie. When I rediscovered it when I was older, is like there's the movie that you know of, like here, drink. Yeah, I think you can see the stickers on it. But like there's the movie that's like kind of going on in the foreground that we're following here with Otto and Bud. But there's also kind of like this background movie of this society that's like obviously in what appears to be like kind of like a financial crisis, and basically just human beings becoming disposable, and like it's very subtle. And I have to say, to really fully pick up on it, you probably almost have to watch the movie 2 or 3 times. But I think that was another brilliant thing that Alex Cox did, with not just setting this in just like really more like the normal world, but creating a backdrop of this weird society. Because his buddy Kevin, after they lose their jobs in the supermarket, he's even like dreaming of like becoming a fry cook and like a manager at a Burger King, McDonald's, and he's talking about it like that would be a great career, which is like sad, but like that kind of is like, a career nowadays.
Well, we're out on the LA River, and we're about to be introduced to the Rodriguez brothers.
Yeah, they're kind of like the for our main repo guys. They're kind of like the I guess they're like the competitors from their own shop, and like they kind of build them up like they can nab just about any car out there. I'd say
They do.
But I gotta say, like, another thing that I love about this movie, and kind of just like a trope or a genre that I eat up with a spoon anyway, is I'm always a sucker, especially with male characters. I think you see it more than female characters, even in films. But I'm always a sucker for the kind of like older man mentor and like the young whatever guy. Like, I remember there was a really good one where maybe about 15 years ago with Robert Forster, and I want to say it was maybe Donnie Wahlberg or somebody, where like they were kind of like learning the diamond trade. It was called like Diamond Men or something like that. But like I'm always a sucker for that thing, and like the thing that I think is great is like how we talk about Otto being a punk that doesn't really fit in with the real punk crowd. Like, I feel like him and Bud, like, even though he kind of like adopts Bud's lifestyle of, you know, not sleeping whatever 2 hours a day, and, you know, snorting speed and all that shit to stay up to keep going and repossessing more cars. Like, as much as he adopts like Bud's lifestyle, it's like at the same time I feel like there's a kinship between them where it's like Bud is almost like the older version of Otto that like Otto would have ended up being 20, 30 years from now anyway. Like, it's kind of weird. Like, I kind of feel like they almost have like a weird soulmate thing going on.
Mm-hmm. I really do. Yeah, I really do like the chemistry between Harry Dean Stanton and Emilio Estevez, because it's like, you know, later on, Harry Dean's character Bud is kind of become he starts to go against his own code. He becomes delusioned. He gets focused on the car and like, oh, what I could do with the money? I could start my own repo company, and everybody does the hard work, and I just sit back and watch, and it results in him nearly getting fatally wounded because of it, and yeah.
Yeah, it's really funny too, because it's like, and I think, you know, what we've been talking about with the generic products, which, you know, we should say too that Otto's buddies, like, it's kind of a recurring theme, is whenever him and Bud go into a store or something, they're just narrowly missing Otto's ex-girlfriend and his friends, Archie,
right.
like, and the other guy played by Dick Rude. I'm blanking on his character name right now, but he's always they're just narrowly missing them robbing a store, and obviously that becomes a bigger part later on.
Yeah.
But I thought this was good. I love this character actor here, Cy Richardson. He's like kind of like a secondary mentor to Otto, and like I love that they try to play this trick of this kind of like fancy lady in this nice car. Otto's going to throw a rat in it, and I'm guessing the object was she would jump out of the car and then they could take the car. But yeah,
although it's funny, Cy Richardson, he later turned up in Emilio Estevez's first movie, Men at Work, pretty much playing the same type of character that he does in Repo Man.
And like, he's great in the movie, but anybody who's a fan of the Repo Man soundtrack, the track with I'm pretty sure he re-recorded like a lot of his lines from the movie, but the track where Cy Richardson is just talking over it, over some of the score, and he's giving his ethics and his codes and stuff, his rules of what he does. It's hilarious. I was just listening to that yesterday. But I love that shot too, like when because Cy just like kind of like, he just like peels out chasing the lady and leaves Otto in the middle. Like, we should say the lady mace sprayed Otto in the eyes. And Otto, like, I just love that. It's just kind of like a sad shot where it's like the POV of like out the back of the car, and Otto just kind of like stumbling around in the middle of the street by himself, rubbing his eyes like he's blind.
Yeah, I mean, it shows that he's still learning the ropes of being a Repo Man. He's not quite there yet.
Yeah, and this is kind of like almost, I'd say, not exactly, because there is a lot of humor in this movie, but I'd say this is one of the most overtly humorous scenes here, where this guy, like, they paint him up like he's got to be rich with this Cadillac or whatever it is, but he's like in a laundromat, kind of like kind of like a rundown neighborhood's laundromat, and he's like giving instructions to the kids how to wash his clothes, because he needs their clothes to get out of the dryers or whatever they're right there, because he needs to sit in his car and watch his clothes. I just thought it was hilarious, and when Otto takes his car, he runs out, and then it's a funny little bit where the kids toss all his clothes out into the street and shit.
Yeah, Repo Man is a very funny movie, but in a subversive way. because you don't pick up on a lot of the humor on first viewing. It's only on repeated viewings that you really do start to pick up on the jokes and the hidden gags throughout.
For sure. And going back to Alex Cox, I would say the main trilogy of films out of all his work, and granted, I haven't seen some, like I haven't seen Walker or whatever, but I would say it would be a great trilogy or maybe a triple feature on like a long Sunday afternoon or something to sit down, watch Repo Man, Sid and Nancy, and then even though Repo Man's personally my favorite, I think his probably most, like his best, like absolute masterpiece of a film is actually one called Highway Patrolman. Have you ever seen this film, William?
No, I haven't. What's it about?
It's really awesome. You wouldn't even think that Alex Cox directed it, but it's literally about a highway patrolman in Mexico. The whole film's in Spanish. It's subtitled, and it's hard to explain because it's like there's a lot of great desert scenes, almost to the similar of the opening Repo Man. I'd say in a lot of ways, I wouldn't doubt if the film was inspired a lot by the film Electric Light and Blue with Robert Blake. But it's really just this story about this guy who comes from a real impoverished background in Mexico, trying to make money for his family. He becomes a cop, or he gets promoted to being a highway patrolman on a motorcycle, and then obviously there's like, you know, it's similar to Repo Man in a lot of ways in terms of like you kind of gotta like. The film's about watching him become a highway patrolman, and you know the shit that, and there's a lot of corruption with criminals and whatnot, and you know the film kind of turns violent halfway through or whatnot, and it just right. I don't know, like it's just a breathtaking film in terms like I would almost say like in a weird way like it almost like reminds me of like a cross between Repo Man and then like something like the very early Robert Rodriguez stuff, especially like El Mariachi. Like it just has that frenetic pace during the action scenes, and then during the slow character things, like it's just, I don't know, like it almost feels like you're watching reality. It's so well done. So I would definitely recommend Highway Patrolman. It was something that like I would say I used to play on like IFC and Sundance like all the time in the late 90s, like around 96, 97. The film's originally from I think around 91-ish. But yeah, definitely. I think it's kind of his, as much as Repo Man is my favorite Alex Cox film, I think Highway Patrolman is definitely his masterpiece.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely have to keep a lookout for it because, like I said, Repo Man is the only film of his that I've seen, so I've yet to see the others. So I'm definitely going to keep a lookout for it, and Sid and Nancy.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny too because like as much as I'd say his better known stuff like Repo Man, Sid and Nancy, like you could kind of see like the, you know, okay, I could see why the director of Repo Man would want to make Sid and Nancy. Like, yeah, like I almost think in a weird way, like Highway Patrolman might be more like up his alley in terms of like what he likes cinematically, because he hosted a show in the UK for many years.
He did. It was called Movie Drome,
yeah.
If I recall.
Yeah, Movie Drome. I almost said Video Drome, but I knew it was something else. Yeah, Movie Drome, where he would kind of like do interviews with, you know, especially filmmakers that kind of make like these fringe and independent films and whatnot. So it's like, it's weird. It's weird. Like I can't think of any other director like that who might have been known more at one given time as more of a TV host than even a director. But he actually hosted that show like after he made like Repo Man, Sid and Nancy, and all these. But I guess it kind of shows the hustle he had to be on to make a living. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Apparently, Alex Cox is. I said Cox. Whoops. Alex Cox. Alex Cox is apparently a fan of the Godzilla movies because when Criterion put out that collection, that Godzilla collection on Blu-ray, one of the special features is an interview with Alex Cox about why he loves the original Godzilla movies. And I was like, oh, wow, I learn something new every day.
Yeah, like there's actually excerpts too, also of Videodrome. I'm sorry, I keep saying Movie Drome on YouTube. Okay. And I remember some of the first ones I seen was actually him talking about Godzilla. So it actually is interesting. It's kind of weird too, with the modern day, like what's going on now. Some of the filmmakers that they got to make some of the current Godzilla movies. It may not be on the wavelength as Alex Cox was, but definitely some weird. It's really surprising that so many people that come out of the world of independent film are obsessed with Godzilla.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, the more I think about it, yeah, it is, because, like, the guy who did the most recent Godzilla movie, he did stuff like Krampus and Trick or Treat, and now he's helming a giant monster movie of all things.
Exactly.
It's really interesting. Yeah, it kind of shows like how far the film industry has come when we let the guys who are big fans of the genre stuff helm the mainstream stuff, whereas before we just get Spielberg to do this movie. Now it's just, well, let's let these guys take a shot at the blockbusters.
Exactly. And like it's kind of funny because I think sometimes that works out for the worst, and I think in the worst case scenarios it's those guys basically just get used as studio puppets. But I think sometimes when it works out for the best is when you can see because a lot of studio blockbusters, they're constructed in a very formulaic way. Like, I mean, I'm a fan of both independent films and also studio films, but like I think the bad thing about studio films is just how they become so rote and kind of like beyond formulaic,
very predictable.
Yeah, and it's always nice when those independent guys make one, because sometimes they just throw in maybe like a character quirk or like a just like a weird scene or a detour in the story that you think probably wouldn't have come in otherwise.
Well, speaking of detours, we have the lattice of coincidence scene, aka probably my favorite scene in all of Repo Man, because I think this scene does epitomize Repo Man and what it is. For sure.
So just talk a little bit. We should say too, it's a scene between Otto and the great Tracy Walter, who are espousing some philosophy here over a roaring dumpster or trash barrel fire.
Yeah. Which, yeah, and by the way, his Tracy Walter's character is named Miller, and there are two other characters named Bud and Light. Get it?
Yeah.
And I really do like Tracy Walter. He's become one of my favorite character actors in recent memory, simply because he's kind of like an actor like Dick Miller, who he shows up in a movie. It's like, oh hey, it's that guy. Because he was also in Batman. He was the Joker's right hand man. He was in the Conan the Barbarian sequel. I think the most recent thing he did was he may have appeared in one of Rob Zombie's movies. But either way, he's always a welcome in sight, Tracy Walter.
Yeah, there's I love the guy, especially as a kid. He was just one of those guys that were like, I guess if you look at his IMDb, you could probably see it. But like, he was just in a run of films for so long. Like, I remember, like me and my dad being avid film goers. Like, it felt like we would see him in like a movie like 2 to 3 to 4 times a year. He just was always popping up in that kind of early to mid 80s era. And it just like the second, I don't care what movie he was in, what type of character he was playing, the second he was on screen, it's weird. He was just instantly recognizable.
Yeah. If there's one thing you could say about movies nowadays is that, yeah, I miss that, having those recognizable character actors who just show up in anything and everything. I think that's something that's kind of missing from movies made nowadays, because nowadays they rely on familiar faces, but they're all like A-listers.
Right.
You really don't see much from the people who might be considered B-listers or C-listers, yet they're a recognizable face nonetheless.
Well, it's kind of funny too, because I think this would probably be hard for people to fathom now. But me being somebody a little bit older and was seeing the movies he was popping up in very early on, I would say like the first probably 10 years of Steve Buscemi's career was very Tracy Walter-esque. Like,
really?
He had done like some large roles in very like unknown scene like movies early on, like Parting Glances and stuff that were kind of like New York things. But like if you look at his filmography, I want to say even after he'd done Reservoir Dogs, and Reservoir Dogs was kind of his big breakout role. But before that, like, he did a lot of, like, Steve Buscemi popped up in a lot of movies in 1, 2, 3 line roles, just in and out, quick things. And it was kind of cool, because I remember another thing, going to the movies with my dad and stuff, like, you would always see, like, Steve Buscemi, especially after Reservoir Dogs, was in, like, 4 or 5 films a year. And, like, sometimes he would be like, the coolest thing about the movie, even though he was, like, barely in it. There's one movie, I can't remember, it's from a famous director, it might have even been Robert Altman, I can't remember. I want to say it's Kansas City, and I think Jennifer Jason Leigh is in it too, and Buscemi has a kind of small supporting role, and it's just totally... Oh, another one is Things to Do in Denver When You're Dead. He kind of plays like the hitman. Oh, it's just like, man, killer. And don't get me wrong, like I love Steve Buscemi, and I'm glad he got to break out, and like he did his starring role in his directorial debut, Trees Lounge, which is awesome as well. But like those earlier films where you just get a tiny bit of Buscemi, like yeah, it's the best in small doses.
So, it's funny here in this scene because if you look in the background, you notice like a lot of guns and boxes, and you wonder like, is that going to play a factor in the movie when it doesn't? And if there's one problem I will say that Repo Man has is that, it sometimes introduces a subplot which you think is going to have some sort of payoff, but it doesn't. Because I know that originally, because they had considered multiple endings for this movie, but one of them was Otto takes the Malibu to Central America and uses it in the effort to fight against to help the what am I trying to say? To help the revolutionaries, because there's a bomb in the back.
You're right.
And the other ending is that they open the trunk and then LA is destroyed because it goes off.
Yeah, and like I know exactly what you're talking about from where the movie was originally headed with the original endings and like the finished product that we have right here. I think the biggest third line thing that's like still there and still kind of half-ass paid off is like the storyline of like the Repo Man office, like where Otto and Bud works. There's like kind of like the pretty receptionist there, Marlena, and she's kind of there almost like. It's never really clear, but she's clearly doing double duty because like we see her dressed almost like a revolutionary, and she's hanging out with the Rodriguez brothers, and like you said, like there's definitely like that, I guess, hint of an underground resistance to going on, but it's kind of hard to really define it because even the authorities who are constantly after the Malibu that has the dead aliens in the trunk and this weird organization that his new girlfriend works for, like it's all very ill-defined. It's never really crystallized.
It is.
But in a weird way, like I'd almost think like as much as that would be a criticism for most films, like it's kind of like a blurry, fuzzy area in this, but it doesn't really like kill or hurt the movie that much because there's so much other stuff going on.
Not really, no. And plus the ending we ended up with, I think, is actually a great ending because it pays off Miller's character. Because for the longest, sorry, froze up there. For the longest while, we think that Miller, he's just the weird guy at the junkyard. But it turns out, no, the weird guy is actually the normal one, aka the one capable of driving the Malibu and, send it off flying. So I'm glad that they went with that approach for the ending and, paid off his character that way rather than just have him be the quirky side character.
Yeah, for sure, and it's kind of funny. And I mean, again, like it's hard for me to put over a movie that's one of my favorite movies already. But when I was watching this movie the other night, and when that ending came, when Miller takes the car and all that, it's kind of weird because like as nebulous as the plot kind of is as you're going through the movie and like the whole time you're watching it, especially I'd say the first time you ever watch this movie, you don't know exactly where it's going, but it's like it's such a great like uplifting ending because you have like all these people that are like battling for this car. I mean the car, I guess, in a traditional way is pretty much like a MacGuffin in itself, but like everybody's after this car, the authorities, the underground revolutionaries, everybody wants it for like their own purpose, supposedly these dead aliens, whatever the mystery is in the trunk. As much as they do state it, like you see that one blurry photo of supposedly what's in the trunk, like even then, like I almost kind of don't buy it fully. But
yeah,
then,
I mean, those are just really condoms filled with water and dressed with grass skirts.
Exactly. so like you don't even know if like that explanation is kind of just like a bullshit explanation that's being passed off on Otto, you know what I mean? Like it really could just be the bomb, it could be anything else. But it's like that ending where Miller kind of comes in and you have like this movie where all these different sides and factions, and even just the Repo Men themselves because they want the bounty on the car. Most cars they get like a $5,000 bounty or whatever, and this one's $20,000. Nobody knows why, but it's kind of that thing of like, I guess it's a statement of capitalism. Like, nobody's asking questions; they just want the money. But yeah, when Miller kind of comes in there and takes the car, it's and Otto joins in with them. It's kind of great that these two characters that I would say probably have the least, amount of purpose and direction within the film, like this power that everybody wants and everybody's so thirsty over, like these guys end up with it and just ended up, like basically taking it for a joyride, but just like, it's cool that, like, this power is not going to be used for evil. It's not going to be, cashed in on whatever. It's just these two guys who really don't have, because even Otto, as much as he likes making the money and he starts wearing a suit and stuff, even by the end, he's burnt out on it. He doesn't care anymore about money and material things. So it's great just to see these two guys. Like, I guess it's really just, a random instance of chance and, just weird fate coming in and taking this car away.
It is. Although it does make me wonder because, Alex Cox had made plans for doing a sequel to Repo Man during the 90s, which it didn't happen because I think everybody was game for it, I think, except for Emilio Estevez. But this is coming from a guy who did a lot of Mighty Duck sequels, so
right.
What does he know? But yeah, it does make me wonder, like, what direction would have the potential Repo Man sequel could have taken if it had actually happened. Personally, I think Alex Cox shouldn't have done a sequel to Repo Man because it's such a great little movie of its own to try to replicate that quirkiness of Repo Man. I don't think it would have worked. Even though, I know they took the planned sequel of Repo Man and they made it into a graphic novel.
Right. Yeah, I think it's one of those things too. Something that doesn't get talked about a lot. Like, especially in this day and age, there's a lot of long gestating sequels. Like, it used to be, if you didn't make a sequel within 3 to 5 years, it's like, what's the point of doing it? And now we've had a lot of these sequels that pop up 10, 15, 20 years later, and people are always like, oh yeah, like, most part the rap is like, yeah, it's good, and it's it was a decent movie unto itself, but like, people always kind of come up with that thing of like, oh, you can't really recapture the feeling of the original. And I think Repo Man would have been a prime example of that in terms of it, like, even though, they were trying to craft this kind of little world that they were, at the same time, a lot of it was influenced by things that were like going on in the early 80s. And like, you could have definitely probably readopted that 10, 15 years later, whenever they were going to end up making the sequel, to be more a snapshot of that current time, but you never really could have recreated the feel of the original, and I think probably a lot of people would have been disappointed by that, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, certainly. Though it is funny, and it's also like, you have to consider that nowadays a lot of the cast that was in Repo Man has passed away, but if for some reason a sequel were to happen, Alex Cox could just pull a David Lynch and have all the dead actors come back as plates of shrimp, like
Yes.
like what David Lynch did with David Bowie in the Twin Peaks revival. How he's a tea kettle, because why not?
Exactly. And I could see Alex Cox coming up with some sort of creative invention like that. And it's kind of funny because as much as I would say this movie's kind of like 50-50 in terms of, like, at least for me as a viewer, like, I feel like the charisma and stuff that are very young and green, and I should say I love Emilio Estevez. He was like actually my favorite actor when I was a kid. He did this film, I'm pretty sure he directed to this film called Wisdom, which I absolutely loved when I was a kid. Did you ever see that one, William?
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, it kind of sucks because it never got like a legit DVD release, but I want to say it came out around like 86, 87-ish. It was around the time where he was engaged to Demi Moore. So it's basically this story where Emilio Estevez plays this young guy who's probably in like his mid-20s, and when he was young, he got drunk with some friends and took a car for a joyride and crashed it. So he went down hard for like a couple years for, basically felony grand theft and all that. So like, here he is, he's still very young. He's still living with his parents, who I think are, if I'm remembering correctly, are played by Veronica Cartwright and and Tom Skerritt. I'm pretty sure that's his parents, which is weird because they were an alien. So maybe I'm mixing that part up, but I'm pretty sure they're his parents. So basically, it's about him trying to get a job and nobody wants to hire him because he's a felon. And basically what happens is he just says, screw it, I'm going to rob a bank. And he's fully intending to rob a bank. But while he's there, and I should say too, this happened around the time in real life that a lot of farmers were facing financial crisis in the U.S. and losing their farms. So he basically, he burns up, and obviously this is a product of his time, but this is when bank records were kept on paper. So he burns up the mortgages of like all the houses and farms and shit. So like a lot of people that were going to like lose their land and stuff, they end up not, because he just destroyed all the records. So he kind of like goes on a mission, and like he becomes like a modern day folk hero through the news, almost like a Natural Born Killers type movie, but more on a positive spin, where he just goes around to banks doing this over and over. And like I don't want to ruin the ending. It kind of has somewhat of a controversial ending, but anyway, like it's just like I just love this movie, as a kid. So like I was all about Emilio Estevez, and going through all his filmography from that time, I want to say I think I've seen all his films, to be honest with you.
Okay.
This movie, he's very green, but I like it. He also did a movie called Nightmares, which I'll talk about in a minute. But I like green young Emilio Estevez is not necessarily bad Emilio Estevez. I'll say that.
Okay. My favorite type of Emilio Estevez is Maximum Overdrive Emilio Estevez.
Yeah, he's great in that.
Which here's a fan theory. Do you think that Repo Man and Maximum Overdrive are set in the same universe? Because think about it. In Maximum Overdrive, you see the green fog in the sky because of the so-called comet. How we know it's not really because of the Malibu and the radiation emanating from it, from Miller flying around Earth?
You could do a double. You could do a double tie-in too, and with Maximum Overdrive, you could also tie Wisdom in, because it's also another movie where Emilio's getting the short shaft because he's a felon or whatever. So you could tie in two Emilio universes in a Maximum Overdrive.
Yeah, forget the shared cinematic universe. I want the shared Emilio universe.
I agree. He got a bad deal. I talked about this, I think, on an episode of Exploited Cinema, so I'll just go through it real quick. He made a deal with, it's basically with Disney, but it's Touchstone, Disney, whatever, subsidiaries. He did a deal where he would write and direct a movie called The War at Home, which is very good, from the mid to late 90s. Where it's basically almost like a Born on the 4th of July. I want to say it's based on a book. But it's about a young guy coming home from Vietnam and having problems and nobody understanding. And I want to say Martin Sheen, definitely Martin Sheen, but Martin Sheen, and I want to say Kathy Bates plays his mom. It's just a great family drama where he plays this guy. So basically he made a deal with Disney where they would fund his movie that he wanted to, star in and direct, and he would do the Mighty Ducks. And then basically, he got to make the movie, which is good. It's even been re-released twice on Blu-ray, believe it or not. But it just got dumped to video. They're like, okay, we got your Mighty Ducks movies, Emilio. So that's why he made all the Mighty Ducks movies. And then then there's actually a great interview with Charlie Sheen from back in the day, the late 90s, where he recants the whole story and slams Disney and talks about how they got their ducks worth. but yeah, Emilio is great, but there's definitely a switch. I would say the mid 80s later and the early to mid 80s, there's definitely two Emilios. There's a more polished, he's great both ways, don't get me wrong, but there's a more polished kind of studio friendly film acting Emilio, and then there's kind of what he's doing in Repo Man, where he looks like he's acting on just raw instinct. And he almost seems like one of those actors who, even though I think he knows the script in and out, he feels like he doesn't, and he's kind of reacting to everything in a very urgent and immediate way. And I like it a lot. I think he's very actually, I think being a part of the whole Sheen family and Charlie and Martin, everything, I think kind of diluted people enjoying how good he was.
Yeah.
Love that scene too, where Cy Richardson shoots blanks into the house because Emilio's trying to repo the Mustang out front, and somebody comes out and starts shooting at him, and Cy just starts unloading gunfire, and we find out later it's blanks. I always thought that was a cool little twist to the story there.
Yeah, that's a great scene. But then again, to pick a favorite scene from Repo Man is kind of hard because I love the whole movie. I mean, like I said earlier, I, I think the scene with Miller and Otto, that's if I had to pick one, it's probably my favorite scene. But really, it's just one of those movies from beginning to end where you kind of like every scene, every moment that happens because it's so damn memorable.
It is, and there's like a feeling, just like with what's going on right now, like where they almost run the scientist guy over in the phone booth. There's like a sense of this movie, the way it unfolds, and I think a lot of that has to be the kind of like newness of Alex Cox as a director at the time. But I think this is kind of a good thing you see with young directors, is like they quite don't know how to thematically like place everything in the right place in the right time. So you kind of get like a more fun roller coaster ride, like where each scene is kind of directed and feels, because there's like some scenes that are very kind of slow and character and dialogue driven, and then there's some scenes in this movie that are like very visually oriented. And I like how young directors aren't afraid to mix that up. And like sometimes, even some of my favorite directors, by the time they get to their 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th film, like they fully develop their style, and you kind of get the same distinct style through the full movie, where it's like this movie feels so epic because there's so many scenes and pieces of subject matter that feel like completely like irrelevant, but at the same time they all tie together to tell the story.
Oh hey, we're on my second favorite scene from this movie, the John Wayne scene. And
Yeah.
by the way, since they're singing Jingle Bells, does this mean Repo Man is technically a Christmas movie?
It could be, because we kind of glossed over it, but earlier there was a scene where he was in the car with Cy Richardson, and they found wrapped gifts in the back, so it very well could be. We could with these two little nuggets here, we could tie this into the Facebook uproar that's been going on for years about whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. We'll just throw that out the window and throw Repo Man into the conversation.
See, if I ever find myself in a group conversation and don't know what to say, I'm just gonna randomly say John Wayne was a fag.
Exactly. And I think the thing that's so amazing about this scene and memorable about this scene is when Miller says to the group, John Wayne, which is bizarre too, that they're like out there like cutting his hair or whatever, and he's like so greasy and dirty. But when he says John Wayne was a fag, everybody gets so immediately mad that they want to beat him up. And they.
Well, I mean, back then, John Wayne was considered a man's man. Though nowadays, people kind of see him as just a dumb cowboy.
Yeah. But yeah. In like his earlier scene that we were talking about, where he talks about the plate of shrimp, like sometimes you're just thinking about a plate of shrimp, and then somebody says plate of shrimp. It's like, it's funny because like, yeah, here he is cutting his hair, but like it's weird because like at the same time, it's like you don't think much of Miller as the movie's going along, but then when you know the outcome of this movie and you subsequently rewatch it, you realize that he goes from kind of like, I would say, being like just a side character with a weird philosophy to like, I almost kind of think he is the philosophy of this film. You know what I mean? Kind of embodied.
He is. Although it is funny to go back to that John Wayne scene one more time. Apparently, it is based off a supposed true story, according to Alex Cox, at least.
Yeah, and is it based on what Miller was saying, that there was two-way mirrors installed in John Wayne's house, and he would enjoy watching people have sex or whatever?
No, well, because on one special features is like a group conversation between Alex Cox and two of the producers, and when this scene is brought up, Alex Cox like, yeah, I met this guy one time who told me this story about how one time he was installing mirrors in John Wayne's car, and John Wayne came out wearing a dress and was making funny remarks at the people, the Mexican landscapers.
That would be very interesting if it turned out to be true.
You never know, but there's the circle jerks in the bar dressed up as lamos, and it's very funny.
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorite songs from the soundtrack too. Like, it's kind of intentionally bad, but like when you hear it enough, it does catch your ear.
Yeah, it is surprisingly catchy. I always find myself saying the do wop what say what. Yeah.
Yeah, I was saying that earlier today. I guess we should say, I got to reveal too, I can't believe I never picked up on this or never at least read it. But my mind was blown here where you have the three punks, Otto's old friends, and you have the one big guy with the mohawk, Archie. And I never knew that was the acclaimed character actor Miguel Sandoval, who makes sense. He's in a bunch of other Alex Cox projects, but
Right.
I've always known him as an older, kind of heavier set man.
What else has he done besides Repo Man and some of Alex Cox's other films?
He's done a lot of shit. Let me hit the IMDb real quick, but like he always plays like a what do you call it, like a government official or like a Hispanic drug lord. It feels like, and I want to say too, I could be mistaken, but I want to say too, because I always knew him as Miguel Sandoval. I think the opening credits had listed as Michael Sandoval, so like maybe that's like, which people don't know Miguel, and like Michael is kind of like the whatever you say American equivalent of Miguel. But yeah, so his things that he's known for, and a lot of these are smaller roles, but he's played roles in things like Clear and Present Danger, Jurassic Park, Get Shorty. I'm pretty sure
who what does it say he's in Jurassic Park? Who's this? What does it say he plays? He's probably like one of the diggers at the beginning when the lawyer shows up.
Yeah, it's like Rasta Agno. I'm not really sure even how to pronounce that. But like he does tons and tons of TV too. But like, just anybody Google the name Miguel Sandoval, and when you see him now, it's always a recent picture. But he looks like a tall, like kind of thin guy in this movie, and he always looked like a kind of, you know, like kind of short, heavier guy. You know, he must have really like done this movie like right before he started putting weight on and stuff. But yeah, he has a very like. It's hard to describe unless you know the guy's work, but he has a very regal kind of way of, like, he always plays a character with a lot of gravitas. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
It's funny because if you watch the deleted scenes of Repo Man, it kind of shows like the alternate storyline, which was a little bit different, where it was actually Archie that was having like, there's a pretty graphic oral sex scene between Archie and Debbie.
Yeah.
Where Otto walks in and they replace that with Dick Rude and her in bed. But like you hear Miguel Sandoval's real voice in the deleted scenes, but for the movie, some reason, and I don't know if it's him doing the voice or somebody else, but they gave him this cartoony voice just like this.
I think he said in one of the extras that it was him who decided to give the character a cartoony voice. Mm-hmm. Like here, right now, he's like, "Oh, Dookie Wookie hurt his little hand."
Yeah. And, like, I could kind of see his face, like, as I know him as an older man in this character, but still, it's, like, it's crazy. It's crazy.
Actually,
if you saw them side by side.
Because you brought it up, the deleted scenes of Repo Man, that extra on the Blu-ray and DVD, that is one of the most funniest extras that I've ever seen, because it's what makes it unique is it's not just Alex Cox talking about, oh, this is a scene we shot and cut out. No, it's him talking about the scenes, but he also has with him the real inventor of the neutron bomb. Right.
That is beyond bizarre. And I want to say those extras have been around for quite a while, because I want to say they were on one of the previous releases that I had. But yeah.
Yeah, they were. And yeah, it's funny because, like, yeah, he mentions it on the audio commentary. It's like, yeah, one day I get a letter from this guy, and he says he's the creator of the neutron bomb, and that Repo Man is one of his favorite movies, the other being Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah. Yeah, it's which in a weird way, like, those two films, like, I feel like they have the same kind of, like, you know, mocking satire spirit. I love too that the Repo guys, like, they put on sheriff hats and, like, they think it's going to fool people into thinking that they're cops. There was a great bit that we kind of skipped past where, you know, Otto got beat up by actually a ska band because he was trying to repossess one of the guy's grandmother's car, and they all just beat him and stuff. They caught him and beat him because the car was up on blocks. And then, like, the Repo Men were asking him, like, hey, who beat you up? We got to know. And he's like, don't worry about it. And, like, they pretty much turn on Otto saying, like, we don't care that you got beat up, but you're one of us. So, you know, we got to go get revenge. So he asked him, who did this to you? And he gave him the name of the nerdy guy who managed the grocery store early on. So it was a great comical scene. But I got to say, this was a great scene where the Repo guys kind of get into a, they were chasing the car, but like then they get into like a kind of road rage incident here with the Rodriguez brothers. Mm-hmm. And again, like I've seen this movie a million times and I've never noticed it. This bridge that they go under, I'm 99% sure that this is the same area from the Terminator.
It's the same bridge that they used in the Terminator, because I can see at the end that's the wall that the Terminator crashes into when he's chasing Kyle and Sarah. Yeah, I was surprised to learn like how much this tunnel has been used in various movies, because it's also popped up in Cobra and The Hidden and a bunch of other movies.
Yeah, it must be an area of town because there's a great runway of space there where you could shoot shit and crash cars and whatever. It must be a place where it's like overnight you can just block off, and there's not much traffic that needs to go through there. But it's very cinematic and it looks great on camera.
It does.
But I was thinking, man, what a crew here, these guys. The only guy that I'm really not familiar with is the one kind of older white guy in the Repo Man crew.
Yeah, he's probably been in Earth stuff, but I couldn't name it.
He's so distinctive, though, like during the parts. And I like how they always had this kind of security guard guy at the office, and like he's like a real prick and always gets into fights with people, but he's always like sitting there crocheting or doing other things.
He's a tough guy, but he has a soft heart.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's kind of funny too, because because this is a movie that built its reputation over time, but it's kind of interesting because Harry Dean Stanton was kind of one of those guys that just kind of always looked old, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, he always did look old.
Yeah,
like an Alien. He looks the same as he did in Alien as he did in Repo Man.
Yep. And it's kind of funny because I mean, I think maybe Alien might have, without like looking at his whole IMDb, but he was somebody who really didn't like hit it big till he was older, or at least active for a while. Because I remember like after Alien, I could be wrong which came first, but I'm pretty sure right before this he was in a movie that was pretty critically acclaimed called Paris, Texas, and played a guy that was like really sad out in the desert, and he got a lot of critical acclaim. I remember that was actually one of the first movies we ever rented on VHS was Paris, Texas. Like literally might have even been the first trip to the video store. My dad wanted to see it.
I think the earliest movie that I've seen Harry Dean Stanton in is Cool Hand Luke.
Oh yeah. It's like the one time you're like, oh, he's younger, but he's still Harry Dean Stanton.
He's
clearly
the same.
Yeah.
He's a great guy. Rest in peace, Harry Dean.
Yeah, he is. Always a.
Did you know they considered Mick Jagger for Harry Dean's character?
I hadn't heard of that, but that makes total sense. Actually,
yeah, it was like they showed the script to Harry Dean's agent, and he was like, no, Harry Dean will take this role. You need to get somebody like Mick Jagger for this role. And Alex Cox was like, no, we want someone like Harry Dean because his character is a grumpy old man. Harry Dean is a grumpy old man.
Yes. I like that little bit where they get in the fight over the winos and Harry Dean's going on the rant about how much do they owe if we could just make them pay. And, Otto's kind of had enough of this life at this point, and he's just like, they're bums, they don't have any money, and they kind of reach a standstill, and he rushes out. There's that last little shot right before it cut where Harry Dean gets sad. I thought that was a great moment.
Yeah. Oh, I never really picked up on that until you mentioned it.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. Like, again, with as much as this movie doesn't make it an overly sappy buddy relationship, because really half the movie, I would say, Otto's out with Cy Richardson almost as much as he is with Harry Dean.
Yeah.
It's kind of the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie where he's like with Harry Dean. Mm-hmm. But, and then there's like that little, like we were talking about the world building, there's that little scene where Otto walked down Skid Row and like the guys in the hazmat suits were just collecting the dead, bums, winos, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I always thought this was a great shot here too, where Otto sees the car and he chases it to the point where he starts getting sick, and like as soon as he goes and he vomits over the side of the bridge, then the car appears underneath. I just thought that was a great little shot right there. something like that just helps cinematic. I guess we should say too. I was like looking at the IMDb credits of this last night, and I was surprised to see Robbie Mueller shot this, who's like a really great cinematographer, and he also shot one of my other favorite films of the period. And it kind of makes sense, To Live and Die in L.A.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, but where does Repo Man rank on your favorite movies list?
It's always hard to like list them in order, but I mean, for me personally, it's top 10 for sure.
Okay, it's probably top 10 for me as well. Yeah, people always ask me, "What's your favorite film of all time?" I'm just like, "Yeah, I'll get back to you on that."
Yeah.
But if I had to like pick 10 movies, I'm pretty sure Repo Man would be one of them.
For sure, and it's like I would say like it's probably one of the kind of like more looser films in my top 10, like in terms of like my favorite movie of all time is like Taxi Driver, and then like A Clockwork Orange is very probably number 2 or 3 at the bottom. It's like a lot of films that I like that are kind of in my top whatever. They're kind of films that are very, very like, I mean, Alex Cox as well with his directorial vision, he knew very clearly what he was kind of going for. But like a lot of those other films, they feel very tight when you watch them for the most part. Whereas like this movie, like, and I say it as like a credit, not a discredit, but like this movie feels very loose and all over the place. And like that's kind of like how I felt like a lot of times throughout the years watching it. But it's like there's something about that like end scene and the way the movie ends. And I know that's kind of like what this movie is famous for. For many years, if you ever to ask people like, "Oh, you ever see Repo Man?" and people would kind of barely have seen it, or they saw it a long time ago, they kind of, is that the movie where the car flies at the end? That's kind of like all people remember about it. But that ending, like with the score and everything, like it kind of like I don't know, like it's really at that point, like the last 10 minutes of the movie to me, all these different factions, all these different elements that have kind of been, ping-ponging around this film, they kind of all get distilled down into like one, and like basically everything comes together, and like the ending is like, I think the ending makes the movie, honestly. Like if they would have gone with the revolutionary thing and all that kind of thing, like I don't think that would have really played as well, because I think the ending that's actually in the movie speaks more to like who Otto is as a character, more than like if he actually found his purpose and did something big and grand with his life. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I think you just blew my mind. I don't know how, but I think you just did.
Believe me, it feels like it's not all going to come together, but when this film ends, it all comes together.
Yeah. It's like when two hemispheres collide. Hemisphere. It's strange. I feel funny.
Yeah, and the guy who plays the scientist who's driving the car around, and now he's finally succumbing to the radiation. He does a great job too.
Oh yeah, he's a great mad scientist character. It's like who you don't see much of, in the earlier scenes, because you get a little hint, but in that scene that we just witnessed, where he's just rambling on and on about the neutron bomb and gamma lobotomy, it's like, oh yeah, this guy he's nuts.
Yeah, completely.
And go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say there's just something about Repo Man that's, I think, a strength of the film is it's very atmospheric, whether it be like the punk party in the beginning, or like the streets of LA, like when they're repossessing the cars, or like like even like this part here, how they're like in the middle of like deserted industrial part of Los Angeles. It's a film that like it's very atmospheric, but it creates many different atmospheres and many different kind of like social groups.
I've been holding it off, but I kind of want to bring it up. How would you say Repo Man compares to something like Return of the Living Dead in terms of the punk vibe and whatnot? Because when I look at Return of the Living Dead, I see it as like a punk take on EC Comics, like Tales from the Crypt. Whereas with Repo Man, I see it as like it feels like some sort of weird offbeat thing that has punk elements to it. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. Like Return of the Living Dead, another movie that I love. Just a great movie that kind of blew my mind as a kid. What I would say with Return of the Living Dead, I don't mean this as a slam on it, and anybody, I hope you don't take it this way, but Return of the Living Dead is more of a plastic punk film. It's more of a dress up punk film. It's like you could have said it a few years later and like had it just been a bunch of hair metal kids as well. You know what I mean? And it's clearly one where like Jewel Shepard, for example, is like clearly wearing a mohawk wig, and same with like Linnea Quigley and like her stuff. But so it's just like this film is like more authentic. Like I would say, and like I'm a huge fan of Dan O'Bannon. Don't get me wrong, I love the guy's work, but I mean, he was a guy I want to say in his upper 30s, possibly early 40s when he made Return of the Living Dead. He's like kind of around that age. He wasn't. Like, I think he was a spiritual punk, but he wasn't, like, a punk. Whereas Alex Cox was a lot younger guy. He was tuned into the scene a lot more. And I think, like, Otto and his friends... Like, his friends are clearly stereotypes of punks, don't get me wrong. But, like, I think with the music that's in this movie and the way it's incorporated, it's kind of more in the background. Whereas, like... Return of the Living Dead is almost like a punk film in a way that like it was like an artistic and possibly commercial decision to steer it punk. Whereas like this film, Repo Man, it's just made by a guy who was like tuned into the punk ethos at the time, and it was unavoidable.
Yeah, with Return of the Living Dead, the punk was very much sort of a stylistic decision because Dan O'Bannon, he said in various interviews he wanted to distance his movie from Romero's stuff as much as possible. So he's like, well, why don't I just model after the punk scene?
And I mean, he did it like he did an amazing job. Like, don't get me wrong, like the punk ethic is like the kind of dressing and atmosphere is one of the reasons why I love Return of the Living Dead so much. But yeah, I've always felt like Repo Man was more authentic.
Plus Return of the Living Dead has that nihilistic fuck you society attitude, which people tend to associate with the punk scene.
Exactly, like it kind of has that thing of like, kind of like the no future, motto is pretty much associated to it. Mm-hmm. And like also too, like it definitely, with the way the military just nukes Louisville there.
Yeah.
It's pretty much. So we should say, yeah, this is the time when all the robberies from Otto's punk friends kind of comes into play. Like they actually come in while him and Harry Dean are buying beers or whatever at the liquor store, and a big shootout ensues. Pretty much everybody except Otto and his girlfriend Debbie gets away. Which I gotta say, like one of the things, and I'm sure it just probably got trimmed out. Actually, I know it got trimmed out when you look at the deleted scenes. But I always wanted more of the group of punk friends who kind of split off from Otto and went on this crime spree, because it's like you get bits of it, but it kind of like, what do you think? I always thought Debbie was the real driving force behind this.
Hold on, I'm trying to think of something to say regarding Debbie. You are right in that regard that it's like it's there but it isn't there. And I think it's more the better because of it, that it's just sort of like it's a thing that pops up every now and then. Because if it become a defined subplot, then I think people have complained too much about there's too many subplots because then people complain like, oh well, there's Otto and the Repo Agency, there's Otto's relationship with Bud, there's and then now there's the punks, Duke and all of them running around causing doing crimes and whatnot. I think it's more the better that it's just sort of left, snippets here and there instead of being fully explored. Yeah,
and I think they kind of wrap it up too. I thought that was a great scene where he talks to his friend who's dying, and he's trying to give him this like almost like this like Jimmy Cagney spiel of like, it wasn't my fault, it was this and this. He's blaming society, to leave me in this life of crime. And then Otto, which is supposed to be a tender moment between him and his friend, like he just kind of, he's like, oh, just like drop the shit, you're just a white suburban punk like me. And like I gotta say, like there's very, like, no matter what kind of counterculture scene you're around or been into or been nearby, in your younger years, there's always that element of it that people are like, yeah, man, we should be doing this, we should. And there's just like, there's always like that kind of like poser vibe, like, like, not saying young people can't be, aware of things in the world or whatnot, but like a lot of that rebellion really is just kind of, dressed up in kind of fake motivations, and a lot of philosophy is kind of just bullshit. That's a great scene too, where Marlene smashes the one, I guess, FBI guy in the face, and he's like, "No, don't hit my face!" And then she smashes him, "My face."
Yeah.
I always thought this was a great gag too, where Otto shoots the coffee on the security guard guy.
Oh, he throws the coffee. He doesn't shoot it.
Yeah, he fires it. Which is great that they just had a full boiling pot of coffee at like 9 o'clock at night going.
Now, you've mentioned it at various intervals in this commentary, but Alex Cox did do a movie many years later called Repo Chick. Now, yeah. I'm a little confused. Is Repo Chick a spiritual sequel to Repo Man? What is it?
My understanding was, spiritual. Let me look up the wiki for it real quick. But yeah, it's like a spiritual sequel, like the sequel that you never got or whatever. And it does bring people back because Miguel Sandoval's in it. So here's the synopsis of Repo Chick. In a parallel America, a super confident bad girl, disinherited by her filthy rich folks, finds work in the repossession business. However, she is unaware that the ultimate repo target, a missing train, is being used by terrorists determined to make their destructive mark. So, and keep in mind, this was all done on a budget of $200,000. So it's when you see it.
I heard. Yeah, I know that was like super low budget.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't want, it's like I don't want to slam the movie in case there's somebody out there that's a huge Alex Cox fan and they love it. But it's just like, it wasn't,
Okay.
It wasn't really up to the, and apparently the reason that it's a quote unquote non-sequel is because Cox shares the right to Repo Man with Universal. So.
Yeah, that's what I've read as well. Is that for the longest while Universal more or less had the rights to Repo Man, and it's only like recently that Alex Cox finally got the rights back to Repo Man. It was kind of the same situation with James Cameron, the Terminator name, though. At least Alex Cox hasn't been like, oh, let's do Repo Man, woke edition. Yeah.
Yeah, one thing about some of these things, some of these works that we knew, from decades past, coming back to the original creators, the thing that I like about it is not even so much that anything would, like, continue or sequels be made. I just like when the original rights holders have it, because usually they're the ones that kind of, want to cash in on it, and like, because I'm all for movies living on long after their original release, so I would really hope that, almost like a Tommy Wiseau type, that Alex Cox would be very willing to book midnight screenings of Repo Man, wherever, people are willing to do it or whatnot. So, and especially in this day and age where, we don't know what the future of theatrical whatever exhibition's going to be, but going back to the 70s when like movies like Eraserhead and whatever, like, were these midnight kind of darlings or whatever. Like, I would love if we could kind of get back to movies living a long life as midnight movies again. Because, I mean, like, I'm a huge fan of The Room, also a huge fan of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but there's a lot of movies that can play at midnight, you know what I mean? Like, Pink Floyd's The Wall used to play quite a bit at midnight when I was a kid, and I kind of don't really get why that doesn't happen more, and I just always figure, well, a lot of like theater chains don't want to be open super late, but like in recent years I've seen a lot of like mainstream theaters have like 11:15 at night showings of like 3-hour Marvel movies or Star Wars movies, so I kind of don't get why you can't do midnight shit more.
I think it's just because audiences are like, no, I don't want to stay up late and see this old movie. Why do that when I can go see the latest hot release at 2 a.m.
and fall asleep?
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because I've met some people during my time in college. I met some people like, you want to watch a movie because it's black and white? Like, yeah, I won't because it's old. I remember in my World War II class, we had to watch Mrs. Minerva, if I'm getting the name right. Yeah, it's like at one point, this girl's just like, oh, yeah, I'm not liking this movie. And I was like, why? Well, for one, it's black and white, and when I heard that, I was like, stop talking.
Yeah. You know, like, it's kind of sad, but I remember, like, you know, in like the mid to late 90s, when people were like so ignorant that they're like, oh yeah, I would never watch Raging Bullets from the 1940s. And it's like, well, what? why do you think that? Like, it was like, what was it, like, won all these Academy Awards in like 1981 or something? Like, why? It's like, oh, it's black and white. It's like, it's just weird that people think, you know, I mean, first of all, it's like, you know, like, other than like sometimes older movies are hard to relate to because of, you know, the way dialogue and language has changed. Other than that, well, first of all, like, I'm in love with black and white photography. I think it's beautiful. But
yeah,
just in general, like it's very interesting to see modern movies. And I know Raging Bull is a period piece, but even when you watch it, it clearly has like the evolved, you know, early 80s kind of film language and technique. I mean, it's one of the most visually striking movies of all time. I mean, you could probably say the same too about Eraserhead with its stark visuals. And like, I've really enjoyed the very few times in modern, you know, I guess modern decades that people have just gone back to black and white for aesthetic decision. I was really in love with Darren Aronofsky's first low budget film Pi, and there were just a few years ago, there was a movie called Nebraska that I thought was really good, and I thought it was really enhanced, just a little character piece movie, but it was really enhanced by it being black and white.
Yeah.
Man, we are in the wrap up already. That's how much this movie.
Yeah, I know. Not to get too praiseworthy with your channel, but yeah, one of the things I like about you is how knowledgeable you are on movies. You know, because it really motivates me to like go and seek out a lot of these movies that I've been meaning to watch, but for one reason or another, I just haven't. So.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, the real power of movies, and a lot of it is just, you know, the habit of being a regular film goer since I was, like, you know, literally in diapers or whatever. But a lot of it really has to do with, like, I mean, a lot of these movies. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've seen like, I'm not shitting you, I've seen Repo Man probably over 30 times. And this past week, you know, I haven't watched it in a year or two because it's somebody who's just constantly, you know, watching new movies, buying Blu-rays of classic or new movies, whatever. It's like, sometimes when you go back and, like, you rewatch something, you re-experience, or like the movie is exactly the same. Every word of dialogue, every shot, every sound effect is the same. But when you watch it years later, you're a different person. And it's like, that's what I think is fascinating about going back to this old stuff, even old stuff that you've seen dozens of times, because you can get something new out of it because you're different than the last time you watched it, you know, especially if it's a film you haven't watched in years.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So this is basically the big wrap up, where basically all the sides, the Repo Men, I don't know, was the government agency really ever that clearly defined? Like, I could never tell if it was the FBI or who that was, like, after the car.
It's just a government agency. I don't think you're supposed to think too much about who exactly it is. I mean, do you see Mulder and Scully running around? Yeah. It's clearly not the FBI.
Yeah. I love the guys, too. I'm a big sucker, too, for guys in these, like, hazmat suits. Like, another movie that was great was George Romero's version of The Crazies. Just all the guys running around. Like, there's something just scary and imposing about that.
Yeah. Yeah, or like the scientist in E.T.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, it's like, you know, especially in something like E.T. or even like this, it's like, okay, people are in hazmat suits because they don't want to get near something that I've been touching or been near this for hours or days. You know what I mean? Like, there's like a weird kind of phobia with that.
Yeah.
And then I think this doesn't, you know, I think it was for time, like, I can't remember, like, because I know in the deleted scenes, they show that this preacher guy was somebody that Otto's parents watched. And it's the same guy that was on the TV earlier, but I can't remember if in the finished film, if we actually saw him. I just remember seeing him when I was watching the deleted scenes the other day.
Okay, so you see him on the TV when Otto comes home, and you see him one more time in the hospital on TV, and then you see him again in the finale. Which actually interesting tidbit about the finale. Apparently, they tried to get Muhammad Ali for a cameo where he, I don't know, approaches the car and gets zapped, but for one reason or another, he didn't accept the offer.
Yeah, it was a pretty weird movie. I could see why Muhammad Ali wouldn't want to. And like, I really don't know. I've listened to the commentary track, and I can't remember if Alex Cox divulged it, but this glowing car, especially these shots here, I really like it. Like, I know there's a few shots earlier where it's driving around where it's more of an animated effect, but this kind of like, whatever they painted it in, this green reflective paint and the lights they shone on it, this is a beautiful special effect, I think.
Yeah, it is. It really makes the car stand out.
Yeah, like, I mean, and I kind of feel like we lose that in modern movies where they're like, oh, here's this CGI box with a CGI glowing light coming out of it. It's powerful. Where it's like, when you're looking at something here where it's like you don't quite know what you're looking at, like how they did it or what it is, but it's still a real thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought it was strange, too. It seems like, if I remember, I'm watching this on a little 7-inch monitor here, but I'm pretty sure the New Mexico license plate is suddenly backwards in this scene. Like, they took it off and, like not just like it's, like, mirror reverse, but it's like they took it off and, like, put it back on backwards.
Okay, well, the car's ascending. Yeah, it is on backwards.
Yeah, it's pretty weird.
I did not notice this. Then again, I was used to watching this movie on VHS, so.
Yeah. Yeah, and I love this. And, I always wondered, too, if this ending was at all influenced by the film Christmas Evil.
Yeah, because isn't it like a guy dressed up as Santa? He's on the run from people, and then the car takes off.
Yeah, like he's in a van, and it's like it's pretty much like he's trying to be like a modern day Santa, but he's killed some people and some things have gone wrong, so he's got a lynch mob after him, and it's one of those movies where people try to say, oh, it's up for debate because, you hear the crash or whatever, like when he crashes over the side of the bridge. But the movie clearly shows that he flies away. So people are like, oh, that was just in his mind, but he really crashed or whatever. But either way, like, it's the only thing. I just became a fan of that movie maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. So, I mean, for the longest time, I never thought of that. But on this rewatch, I kind of thought of that. So,
well, I do know, because we are at the end credits, and I do want to bring this up quickly, but Repo Man does take some influence from a noir film called Kiss Me Deadly. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I'm familiar with the film, but like I can't remember if I've ever watched it all the way through.
Yeah, it's one I've seen bits and pieces of, but the key scene is that at the end there's like this box that they've been looking for. And at one point, one of the characters opens it, and it's this bright light shining, and it sets the person on fire. Very much like how in Repo Man, when anybody opens the trunk, they get vaporized.
Exactly. And I kind of always wondered, too, because I think Kiss Me Deadly was what they would always list as the inspiration for the glowing briefcase in Pulp Fiction. But then again, like, knowing Tarantino, I almost wondered, too, because he also does a lot of trunk shots for some reason. I always wondered, too, if maybe he was also influenced by Repo Man, but who knows. We got to mention, because we were talking about the iconic credits, kind of how they were just red generic block in the beginning, and now like this always stuck out in my mind too. Like the end credits, they actually scroll downwards.
Yeah, that is very unique. I can't think of too many Arab movies that do that, where the credits are like played inverse style. The only one I can think of is Corner Store, because I think the credits to those are actually inverse as well.
Really? I thought maybe the credits, they're like more done in a hand-drawn style, but I'm pretty sure the credits to 7 are like that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then like also too, like you'll see like a lot of like I thought this was weird too, and you probably read this too, William, but that Dick Rude, who played like Otto's buddy, his punk, was somehow the I don't know what you say, the consultant. He's listed in the credits here too, besides his acting credit. Like supposedly he consulted with Alex Cox for making the TV version, but I really never understood why. Like,
I think it's because Dick Rude had developed a really good friendship with Alex Cox, because you have to remember he was originally supposed to play Otto, but then they decided to go with Emilio Estevez, and in turn they cast Rude as his best friend. So I kind of figure it's like, Cox just doing him a favor, like, hey, I know you get to play Otto, but you get a supporting role. But I'll tell you what, I'll put together his TV version. I'll let you lend a helping hand.
Yeah. And also, too, I just noticed this last time watching it, but one of the grips was listed as Rowdy Harrington, who actually would go on to be a director. Unfortunately, he's most known for directing the Patrick Swayze classic Roadhouse. But
Roadhouse is an amazing movie.
Yeah.
So holy shit!
Yeah.
I never picked up on that.
Yeah.
That could be the same Rowdy Harrington.
I was thinking it's got to
mind.
be, because how many guys are named Rowdy? But he also, right before Roadhouse, he did a movie with James Spader called Jack's Back, which is like a movie I love. But it kind of sucks, though, because Roadhouse was a hit, so he went on to do some like bigger films. Like he did the film Gladiator, not the Russell Crowe one, but the boxing movie with Cuba Gooding Jr., and then he also did Striking Distance with Bruce Willis. So I just thought it was that funny that, like, when you watch this movie, like, one of the just random crew members was a guy who was, like, actually directing big movies 5-6 years after this.
Hey, everybody starts somewhere.
Clearly. So, yeah. And also, too, I wanted to throw out a recommendation if you're a fan of Repo Man, because I always feel like these movies are somehow linked. But I brought up the film Nightmares, and it's been released a couple times on DVD, a couple times on Blu-ray, I think, or maybe just once on Blu-ray. But it's an anthology film, a horror film, and it came out, I want to say, a year before this, and it was also a Universal picture. And basically, Nightmares is an anthology horror movie. It was meant to be a television movie, but it got for whatever reason, like, they kind of like went back in and reshot some stuff, or they tried to spice it up, and like they made it a theatrical release. So I was like very aware of Nightmares as a kid on video, and the reason I bring it up is I'm blanking on the name of the segment. It's called The King or The Bishop or something. Never mind. But anyway, like, basically in that story, we get a young Emilio Estevez. He has a young sidekick boy that's always with him, and it's from the days of when arcades were super hot. And he plays a young punk with a blonde hair. It's not quite. It is spiky, but it's not quite Otto's hair. It's a little bit longer, and he's constantly has a Walkman, and he's putting on like different songs. Like, I think if I'm not mistaken, he might even put on "Let's Have a War." But there's like a couple songs that he listens to. And I just thought it was interesting that, like, Emilio did another kind of punk role. And, like, without going too much into spoilers, but, like, the video game that he's playing and he's obsessed with beating is alive. And he breaks into, actually, like, late at night, in the middle of the night, he breaks into the arcade to try to beat it, and something supernatural happens. But, yeah, like, I always thought that was a nice, weird, like, little, especially because he probably filmed them almost back to back. Like, I don't know the exact order, but yeah, he was pretty much in The Outsiders, Nightmares, and then Repo Man, like, all around the same time.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to check it out.
I just remembered the segment is called The Bishop of Battle. I think that's the name of the arcade game as well. But it's definitely fun. There's a lot of scenes of him, getting in, like he lives, like, it's almost like Repo Man. Like, he lives in the sprawl of LA. Except he lives in an apartment with his parents, and like his mom and dad, he's like all Mr. Punk Rock and stuff, kind of, and like he kind of has those rebellious scenes where, like, all he wants to do is run away from home and play video games and stuff. And there's a cool fight where he gets in trouble and he has to sneak out the apartment building and scale down the side of the apartment building to go out to the arcade. But yeah, it's just a nice little, like, almost weird, because it is Emilio Estevez. It's like a weird side thing. It reminds you a lot of Repo Man when you watch it.
Cool.
So do you have any parting bits of trivia or just any thoughts of Repo Man now that it has concluded?
Not really, because we've pretty much expunged on everything that I think I could say about Repo Man over the duration of the movie itself. All I have to say is that it still remains a great movie and one of my favorites.
Absolutely. It's very powerful. And I want to thank you because, we kind of met very much on a whim. And I think it was almost jokingly, you said, can I be on an episode of your podcast? And I said, sure. And you kind of seemed shocked, but.
I think so because at the time I was probably thinking like, oh, I need to find some people to collaborate with because at the time I had just put an end to a show I had been doing called Will and Matt's Excellent Podcast. The reasons of which I won't go into, just because it involves a lot of personal stuff. But yeah, I was like, at the time I was thinking, yeah, I need to find some people to collaborate with because I have another collaboration set up with another podcasting channel, whose name I won't say because we haven't done it yet. We're not doing it till March. But yeah, I was thinking like, well, I've seen you on. I've heard you on Revival House a lot, so I was like, yeah. Why don't I reach out to you and be like, hey, you want to do something sometime? And when he said yeah, I was like, oh, okay, yeah, let's choose a movie. All right, I'll send you a list. All right, and he's like, oh yeah, let's do Repo Man. I'm like, fuck yeah, let's do Repo Man.
Yeah, like I think the list you sent me, I think they were all movies that I wouldn't mind doing at all. But then Repo Man stuck out to me, and I want to thank you for kind of helping me do this because to be honest with you, just like when you have a podcast like this and you're covering films, like yeah, there is like that. That dream list of films you want to, like your favorite films or films you want to do. But then also, too, a big part of it is finding somebody to do the episode with. And for some reason, like I'm almost kind of surprised we didn't do this very on in the podcast, but we didn't. But Repo Man, and I was like, great. It was just a great opportunity for me to finally talk about one of my favorite movies. And like more than anything, the best part about it was like I was like kind of bummed the last week, like post holidays, whatever, everything going on in the world, and work was kind of like stressing me out, whatever. And to kind of rewatch this movie at this time, which I probably wouldn't have just plucked this movie off the shelf right now because I got so much shit. I got piles and piles of movies that I've acquired lately and I want to get through. So to go back and like rewatch this and be so into it and like remember like not only that I was into it when I was younger, but why I was into it. It was so much fun. It put me in such a better mood. In all honesty, like it kind of brightened me up. So, yeah, it was awesome, and it was you that gave me the opportunity to do that. So I appreciate it so much for coming on.
No problem, man. I had a blast doing this commentary and talking about The Last of Coincidence.
Exactly.
With the fellow Repo Man fan, and it is also interesting. Yeah, hearing your nostalgic connection to Repo Man because I didn't see this movie until like a few years ago. I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago that I finally, got a copy of Repo Man, watched it, loved it, and yeah, it's again become one of my favorite movies since then.
Yeah, and like that's what's great about doing a show that talks about older movies is I love hearing hearing other people's stories about when they came to the movie and how the movie came into them and what time of their life that they experienced it. And just like, yeah, like some of my favorite movies that we've covered recently, they're old movies, but they're movies that I discovered like 5 years ago. You know what I mean? So, I mean,
yeah,
that's what I love about, I love movies, period. To me, there's really not such thing as an old movie or a new movie. Like, I get what that term means and what it refers to. But like, if you can sit down by yourself in a room at your house or at a theater or just however you experience the movie and like it speaks to you, it moves to you, or like you can relate to something in it, like yeah, like that's the power of cinema. And like I hope we don't lose that because it seems like more. And there's nothing wrong with television. I love television too, but I kind of fear that we're going from a society that used to revere and love movies and talk about them for decades to like now we have so much entertainment at our disposal that movies get forgotten about quicker and kind of sucks.
It's definitely reached an oversaturation point, especially with all the streaming services and whatnot, because people are always like, oh, have you watched this? Have you watched that? It's like, oh, it sounds interesting. Where can I watch it? It's on this streaming service. It's like, yeah, I'll pass.
I know, and like I know local video stores, whatever, didn't have everything back in the day, but at the same time, like, I missed the day when we were all, like, for better or worse, and I realized it wasn't as convenient, and it wasn't whatever, but for better or worse, like, you could say, hey, have you seen this movie? And somebody like, oh, no, you tell your friend about it, and then chances are they would probably see it next time they were at the video store and probably rent it, you know, or at least have it in their mind. But, yeah, it's kind of sad. But
back in my day, you had to go out to your car and drive to a building if you wanted to find a movie to watch. You had to pay money for it. You couldn't just click on it or pay a monthly fee.
Exactly. That's exactly how I feel. And at the same time, like, I feel like just like anything, as much as entertainment is there to de-stress us and take us away to a different mindset or whatever, at the same time, when you had to work to find a good movie, once you did find it, it was so much more rewarding. So.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, man, I want to thank you. Do you want to point people to GamerGuy?
Yes, if y'all are interested, I run a website called GamerGuy's Reviews, where I review video games, as the name of the website would indicate. I've been on a bit of a hiatus just to figure out what to do next with the website, and I'll be back to writing reviews soon. As for when, you can probably expect the first reviews by next week, or what will be next week whenever this episode gets uploaded. I also do interviews as well, so if you're curious as to where you can find reviews, interviews, and all sorts of other stuff that I do, the name of the website is GamerGuysReviews.com. I also have a YouTube channel that's also called GamerGuys Reviews, but at the moment it's still under construction. I'm still trying to work some stuff out. You can probably expect video reviews on that channel within the next couple of months, but like I said, it's currently undergoing maintenance. So if you want the real deal, you want the real stuff, go to the website, not the YouTube channel.
Yeah, I really like the website too, because I was gonna say I really like the interview you did from the guy who worked at LucasArts and THQ. Yeah, that was really good.
John Knowles. That was a great interview. He had a lot of interesting stories to share about his experiences in the industry, and that's kind of something I actually want to do. That's one of the goals I have with the website /channel this year, is to interview more people who've worked in the industry, and like to hear their stories about working on all these different titles and whatnot. So we'll see how that unfolds as the year progresses.
Yeah, I think that's a great space that not a lot of people have tapped into, because like I'm a little bit of a video game history fan myself, and like I was like a Sega fan back in the day, and like following the company all the way through the Dreamcast era and whatnot, and being a fan of its developers and whatever. And just reading every bit of history, and then like reading this interview kind of took me back to when I used to follow all that stuff. And like, yeah, just like, we have favorite films and stuff that, we loved as kids or whatever. And we always want to know the behind the scenes and hear the writers and directors talk. Like, I think it's about time people start focusing on the favorite games we had growing up and listening to the people and kind of, because there's a lot more that goes in behind it. I mean, it's pretty fascinating, some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes in the video game industry. So like, I thought it was very cool that your website was like checking in on that kind of aspect of it.
Thank you.
No problem, man. So again, William, I want to thank you for joining me. I feel like a punk again. I feel renewed.
Let's go do crimes.
Yeah, like get sushi and not pay for it. So everybody, thanks again for joining us here in the new year. Even though as time marches on, we're still going to rewind you back to all these great films, and hopefully you guys have your own history with this great classic Repo Man. I loved revisiting it. So everybody, thanks a lot for joining us, and we'll see you next time here in the Movie Graveyard.